Got it.
Welcome to our first episode of the Stories Behind the Stories Mackinac Island edition. I'm your host, Linda Hughes, and I am absolutely thrilled to have four authors with me today. All of us set our novels on Mackinac Island, and I've been wanting to get together with these folks forever. My hope was to do it on the island, but here we are. We're doing the very best that we can do today. And I'm just thrilled to have these authors with me. And I think you're going to enjoy so much learning about why we write about Mackinac Island and some of the things perhaps that we've learned along the way. And how on earth do we conjure up these stories that are in our heads that are set there? So without further ado, I want each of our fabulous authors to introduce yourself. And Stacy, we'll start with you. Tell us a little bit about yourself. And you know I have some questions for you later on, but tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe show us one of your books. How about that? Just to begin with, just show us one.
All right, one of my books. I'll show you my only book, my debut novel, set on Mackinac Island called When the Season Ends. Cover art by Noelle Skiba, who's an award-winning Mackinac Island artist.
Love
The
it.
book release is actually September 4th, but it's in pre-sale at the Island Bookstore. And I know we all have such fond regard for the Island Bookstore. The novel is set on Mackinac Island and involves a 40-year-old woman who's going through an identity crisis of sorts. But I was inspired to write the novel because I had spent a season working on the island at the Hotel Iroquois as a waitress. We didn't have waiters in those days. We just had waitresses who wore French-made waitressing uniforms. And that season, although I went on to do a lot of different things, as a marketing communications writer, it just stuck with me. And finally, my husband said, would you just say no to paid projects and write the possibly unpaid novel? Just get it out of your system and get it written. So I did. Because the island, as you know, it just roots in your heart and doesn't really leave.
Boy, isn't that true? That is so true. And Dave, tell us a little bit about yourself, but I want you to tell us what I've heard you say before about being a dock porter that you were compared to Stacy being a waitress at the Iroquois.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's there's my name's Dave McVeigh. I co-wrote with my buddy and partner Jim Balone three books set on the island. The Dock Porter was the first one we did. The second one was called Somewhere in Crime, which takes place during the summer of the shooting of Somewhere in Time, thus the clever title. And then the last one we published last summer is called Misguided, which same character, basically three different summers, three different ages. The reason, obviously, I mean, I spent all my summers on the island growing up. So my family had a cottage on the island. So I spent like the first 22 summers of my life up there. So these were stories that had to come out. I work in the film business, and for a long time, the first Dock Porter started as a film project. Actually, it was a script that I was going to direct with my brother Scott, and life got in the way and whatever. But we were close on that. But it was a story that I could not shake. And during COVID, actually decided, you know what, why don't I just write this as a novel? And then we did. I got Jim involved and we knocked it out and it was awesome experience. And we decided to do two more. But I can't even remember the question that you asked me.
What I asked, I heard you say something about being a dock porter compared to the Iroquois waitress.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm going to get myself in all kinds of trouble, but why not? Yeah, I was a dock porter, as was Jim, in the 80s, mid to late 80s. Jim's a little bit older than me, but he was there, before I was, but we overlapped for a while. But yeah, the Iroquois waitresses were always kind of like the classy. I mean, everybody was, I'm not putting any value judgments on anybody else, but yeah, the Iroquois was always kind of like that classy hotel at the end of the road. The Macs were, and I knew the Macs very well, but they definitely had kept a very close eye on their staff. And
Yes, they did.
and we were a little bit
You
more
had
on
the
the one.
feeling
Go ahead.
You had the feeling after hours antics could be reported back to the Max, and you did not
Yes.
want to fall in Mrs. Max list. Like you
No,
just
no.
wanted like a very difficult professor or coach, you just wanted to overperform for
They
them.
had very high standards, thus keeping them away from characters like Doc Porters. So,
Oh, that's so funny.
no.
Where all the fun was.
Yeah, exactly. You
If
said it,
you
not
happen to
me.
have your book covers on hand, because I don't know if everybody who's watching or listening would know what a dock porter even is, but because on Mackinac Island there are no cars, the dock porters transport luggage for people there.
They do that. See, they
Yes,
ride the bikes. It's right on the cover with all the luggage stacked, and then they go across the
Absolutely.
country.
And I can never believe how they do that, how you did that. You just stack them up and stack them up.
Yeah, it was
There they
insane
go.
looking
So,
back. I can't quite figure it out either. But they're still doing it, man. I mean, it's just, I didn't get up this summer, but I was up last summer for a book signing. And I mean, there's still the tradition remains. And that was part
Yeah.
of the reason I always wanted to do it, because I always felt like it was a very unique subculture and very just a cool, sort of interesting fraternity that was unusual and unique to Mackinac. And it summed the whole place up in some ways. And I always wanted to write a book about it because I wanted it to remain. And not that it wasn't going to, but I felt like it has
Yeah,
to be like carved in
sure.
stone somewhere. So
absolutely.
they're still doing it, which is
I
awesome.
love that. And the island, you talk about the camaraderie and working together as a group. I think all of us that work on the island in one way or another feel a connection to it that never goes away. It just stays with us. Michelle,
Mhm.
tell us a little bit about yourself
Well,
and
my name's Michele Olsen, and I live 5 hours from the island in Green Bay, Wisconsin. Everybody thinks I live on Mackinac, but I do not. I don't even live in Michigan.
Hmm.
I live 45 minutes from Michigan, but so I had been going to the island for 40 years as a tourist and loving it. And I would go to the island bookstore and I would look at books and I'd want to take a book home to keep that island feeling going long after my trip, never having any idea that I would write a book that would end up on the shelf there. But my background is marketing, advertising, and I'm a professional voice. I still do professional voice work all over the country and the nation. And I was a disc jockey for years and all that type of thing. So I took all that kind of break the mold kind of thing and thought, let's have some fun and do some books. So my first one was Being Ethel in a World That Loves Lucy. And I also have Being Dorothy in a World Longing for Home, Being Alice in a World Lost in the Looking Glass, Being Wendy in a World Afraid to Grow Up, Being Nancy in a World Lost in Mystery, which I have Simon and Schuster's permission to use Nancy Drew. It's filled with Nancy Drew. And my latest is Being Goldie in a Just Right World with Goldie and Gilda Locke's twins. And I just say they're books filled with mystery, mayhem, mirth, miracles, and a touch of romance. So I was getting close to retirement age from my 42-year career and all kinds of media and that type of thing. And had the idea that I always wanted to write a book, never had written fiction. So took a couple courses on the difference because I was used to advertising writing and just started doing it and loved it and brought in all the things that I love, old Hollywood, old TV shows, all the things I Love Lucy, Wizard of Oz, and Mackinac Island because I've been going for 40 years. Smushed it all together. Books. Boom. Voila. Magic.
And it's been wonderful. Clever. Your titles are, I mean, and the whole plot of each one is so clever. I really.
Thank you. And I do the covers, the art on the covers.
Oh,
And
you do?
yeah, I do. And this year was kind of fun because I was a finalist in the poster contest. So I got to go do that whole aspect of it on Mackinac this summer, along with signing books. So that was really fun.
Now, when you say you do the covers, do you use stock images or did you
No,
actually,
I paint them.
you painted
I
that?
paint the
Fantastic.
postcard,
Did not know
which is
that.
like this is Round Island Lighthouse. This is Little Stone Church. And
Yeah,
this is, you know what that is.
Arch Rock.
Arch Rock and Grand Hotel. Yeah. So yeah,
Awesome.
in fact, I kind of can't write a book until I paint the postcard. That's my process.
Wow.
I have to
Oh,
paint the postcard first. And then I put a flower that's on the island that also has a part of the story too.
That's wonderful. I couldn't paint a picture to save my soul, so I'm glad.
And I teach doodling, and everyone can paint and doodle. Every single person in the
Oh.
world. You just need to learn a few basic things, and you too can doodle.
I don't know. I don't.
You can. Everyone can.
Well, Carrie, tell us a little bit about yourself and what it is that you write, and maybe show us one of your books.
I'm Carrie Fancett Pagels, and my background is I was a psychologist for over 27 years, and I loved it. I worked with young people. I am from the eastern Upper Peninsula of Michigan, which is where Mackinac Island is set. And where Mackinac Island is, it's not set there. I guess our books are set there. I'm highly proficient at stick figures. I mastered that along with my PhD in psychology. And you would never want to ask me to do anything artistic, trust me. But this last year, I'm not like all you artists. This last year, I was really blessed because I got to have a multi-award-winning watercolorist do the cover for Tandem Cottage. And so this is like my 12th book set on the island or in the vicinity of the island. Since you want us to talk about ourselves and probably not just me to go through 12 books, I'll stick with the fact that I switched from being a psychologist to writing. I always thought I wanted to write, and then I have rheumatoid arthritis, and 15 years ago, I nearly died. And that's about the time that my books really, really took off. I was writing, and I had a book. I had a series I wanted to pitch to my agent, and I kind of figured you can't see clients in the middle of the night for therapy. They just don't like that, like if you're out of commission with your rheumatoid arthritis, you can't say, hey, Dave, you want to talk about something wildly crazy at 4 a.m.? He's going to say no.
I might actually.
Well, yeah, he probably. Yeah. Dave
Everyone else wouldn't, but me, I might actually be into that. But yeah.
We loved meeting Dave on the island, by the way. My son still remembers that, and he loved his book. And it was just a really great memory meeting him at Island Bookstore. It was when the first book came out.
Yeah, Doc Porter.
That was really fun. But this first book, this had a different cover at first. I had some other novellas, but My Heart Belongs on Mackinac Island has really been a great seller for me. That's the newest cover. I threw everything at that one. I thought, well, I wanted to write it because my books are different from most others in that I have friends from the island, and I'm coming from the viewpoint of people that live on the island. And so when I was a young psychologist, I had worked on the island for Little Bob, being it's funny because I was a dessert maker. I couldn't make a dessert for the life of me. My mother was a cook.
Great cinnamon rolls.
Pardon me?
Where was that? Where'd you make dessert?
Little Bob's. Little Bob's. I love that place.
They still had the best for a while anyway. They had the best cinnamon rolls you've ever seen in your life. They were like the size of your head.
Oh.
They did. I actually just assembled the desserts.
Yeah.
And so that was my job. I was there for the entire summer. I loved it. Never hung out with any kind of dock porters or anything like that, being a very shy 16-year-old. Never was at the Iroquois. Never any of those restaurants to have a waitress wait on me. I was 16 years old, away from home. And I went out one night with one of Bob's son. We went down to the beach, not out on a date, but we're down to the beach where people like Dave, over a decade later would be hanging out. But no, I was very shy, but I loved riding around the island. I just loved it. And I loved being on the island. It was very peaceful. It was, my soul just really got connected to that place. And I've heard that over and over and over again from people, that there's something about it that connects with their spirit, with their soul. And since I write Christian fiction, that's, a good connection for me. I was writing Christian fiction, historical romance, but I switched to contemporary women's fiction. As I've gotten older, I've just found that just resonates with me more, writing women's fiction and writing now, because also the research, Linda, is just as you guys know, that have the stuff that's set,
Well, Carrie,
the research.
that actually ties into my question about the research that we do. How many of us do most of us do research about the island? Yeah.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
I mean, I did a lot on the last one because the last book was called Misguided, and was the main character, is a guide at the fort, and I just made up tons of fake history about Mackinac and Beaver Island, but I wanted to know the real stories first. So I definitely looked up the real story before I could destroy it.
It's fascinating. And so I'll tell you a little bit about my books, but then my question to all of you is about the research or the experiences we've had that might have surprised us about the island. I think we've already talked a lot about how we connect to it. It feeds your soul, as you said, Carrie. And I write what's called real world women's fiction. And the first novel I ever wrote, I have 8 set on the island. The first one I ever wrote was called Secrets of the Island. And it's a woman who is traumatized as a nurse in World War II, and she goes to the island where her grandfather has a cottage, and she finds out all kinds of mysterious things about her family history. So I, like most of you, I did a lot of research to find out what really went on the island during that time, but it led to a lot of surprises. I was just really shocked at some of the things I learned, and in my subsequent books that I hadn't ever known. I knew that the Native Americans, before the Europeans came, had used the island as a sacred place, a sacred meeting place in the summertime. And that was so lovely. And it was also kind of a place where people would match up in terms of marriage from different tribes. I mean, that was fascinating.
Oh, that's cool.
I know, but what are some of the things for anybody here? What's something you've learned about the island in your research or in your experience that really surprised you, that you wouldn't have known otherwise?
I would
I
say,
had go ahead.
sorry, go ahead, Michelle.
I love all the history of it. I try to put history in every book because I end up having a store there, which isn't real, but a lot of the other stuff is real. But the store that everybody goes to isn't real. I wish it was there, actually. But I had a character that went to the library. Now we've all been to where the library is, right? So I was just assuming that library has been in that place forever. And my books go from 1979, 80, 81, 82, 83. They go up like that. First, like you, Dave, first one was when they're filming Somewhere in Time and they become extras in the movie. So I just went, well, that's probably where the library was because she meets someone there. And I went and it's like, that wasn't where the library
It was on Market Street.
Right. So then that was like, oh, good thing I looked.
Yeah.
So then I had to, when I was writing it, I found that out. So then I had the character go to where the library was at the time.
It was tiny. It was, I used to go there all the time as a kid, actually. Because that was kind of like my hometown. I mean, I was there because I was there every summer growing up, and long summers, our whole family would move up there. And so, I mean, I grew up in Milford, Michigan, but Mackinac was.
Oh, that's such a cute town. That's an
it's
adorable
cute.
town.
It's cuter now than it was at the time. It was never bad, but it was definitely kind of like Hicksville back in the day. But it's gotten very cute. I was there recently. I'm like, wow, this is very cute. I wouldn't have
Artsy.
described it that way in 1984, but it was cool. It was still a great town, just definitely a little different. But yeah, so I mean, I remember that library when it was on Market Street very well. It's funny.
That's amazing. One of the things that I learned, because I looked up a lot of information at the Library of Congress online, and one of the things I learned that really surprised me was how many women early on, and they were Métis, which were French and Native or Native American women, who ran businesses very successfully. And John Astor's competition was Madame Laframboise, who had a fur trading business, and she was the first in her family. Her mother had done it, her sister had done it. There were other women on the island that did it.
Yeah.
And I started looking into it, and these women were absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
And then I also found in the Library of Congress a lot of marriage certificates for French fur. And they would say on the marriage certificate that they had married, they would have the man's name and then say he had married a savage. And that just
wow.
broke my heart.
Yes.
these women, and think of how many languages all the people back then had to speak. Because first that area was native with many different tribes with different languages. Then it was French, then it was British, then it was American, then it was British, then it was American again. And think of how smart in their own way those folks all had to be. And I think back, would I have survived all of that? I would have, but I don't know how well I would have done at it. And so that just fascinated me.
When
that-
I was
That's
go ahead, sorry.
no, that's okay, Dave. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that when I was growing up, my mom was the head of PR for the state park, the Mackinac Island State Park. And
Fantastic.
one of her employees at the time was Phil Porter, who's like the preeminent historian on the island now. So I grew up around Phil. And that was always, I mean, so the history stuff was just always around us because he was a friend of the family and he still is. But I mean, the history on that place is beyond. I mean, it goes deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And I think my personal opinion is that's part of the reason that it has that, whatever it is that's in the air that you breathe when you're there, that's beyond the smell of, horse droppings, but there's something going on there that's way like mystical.
For
even.
me,
It feels
one of the things
sacred.
that surprised me, like what Dave was just saying about the Mackinac State Parks, and that in my research, what surprised me coming from, perspective of just different friends I had whose folks grew up on the island, grandparents, people that helped settle the island. And so these are people, islanders. For me, what was surprising to me as I researched after having been taken on this big tour around the island, 10 years after I worked there as a dessert maker, was in the research to find how much was state park, the fact that it was the second federal park, national park in our nation, and that later it went to state park. I really didn't realize how much of the island was owned by the state parks. I had a really different perspective. I was looking at it more from the islanders who had owned land for a long time, and a lot of them live in that Harrisonville area. So that was surprising for me.
I've been doing some research on what I think will be the sequel, a dual timeline sequel. And it's speaking of the sacred nature of the island, unbeknownst to me, when I'd spent a year in Scotland and had been adopted by a couple, he had been a World War II fighter pilot, was gunned down over Crete, made his way back to Scotland and London and helped plan D-Day invasion, which was pretty cool. He was a wing commander. They sort of adopted me, and then he told me about moral rearmament, was a movement that Edward and his brother David were involved with. I did not realize that Moral Rearmament's first headquarters was on Mackinac Island. They kind of took over the mission school Mission Point, and that Mission Point building, what's now the main resort desk area, if you will, or lobby, was really built intentionally to bring nations together, to sort of resemble a wigwam. And of all things, I also didn't expect this. My husband's former coworker, he recalled that her husband had ties to Mackinac College. So I got in touch with him. He lives in this town, Bay Village, Ohio, west of Cleveland. And we're going to have lunch Thursday. He's going to tell me about his 3 years at Mackinac College. He did not graduate from Mackinac College because he knew it wasn't going to be sustainable and he needed certification to be from an accredited university to become a teacher. So I'm excited to hear a little bit more about these weird tangents in my life that seem to be coming together on Mackinac Island.
There's another cool little tangent that's related to what is now called Mission Point, which is, and I don't think there was a ministry up there for a while that was owned by or run by a guy named Rex Humbard.
Yeah.
Rex Humbard of Akron, Ohio, south of here.
Okay. So when I was a kid, there was a ski lift. And I'm not kidding. They actually had a ski hill at Stonecliff.
Yeah.
I mean,
pictures.
I've been there. I mean, it
crazy?
was all rusted out when I was there, but we used to play on that ski lift. And I was like, who built a ski lift? But he was trying to make it into sort of a resort. I don't know exactly it's crazy. The history of even Stonecliff is wild. And if you dig into what Stonecliff's been, a lot of different things, but I just love the fact that they're like, well, there's a hill. We might as well make it into a ski.
Sure. It's part of our ministry. It's our outreach. Ski outreach.
Wild.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just wild, the stuff that, different
That's
stories.
crazy.
I loved learning from Phil Porter that the island was very important during Prohibition because
Oh,
it
I'm
was so
sure.
easy to sneak liquor from Canada to the island with all the little fishing boats,
Yep.
and they would distribute it all
It
over
was
the
it
coast.
was a bootlegger's little stop
Little
off.
haven.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's
That
really
explains
fun.
that explains a lot.
That explains a lot. Maybe it's gift.
The spirits of those people are
Yes, the
still
spirits.
there.
I mean,
That's right. Well, what else? Anything else that surprised anybody about the island?
I have a good one because I used one of the last book that Jim and I wrote was called Misguided, and it was all sort of takes place at the fort and is all very much about fort history, but completely fictionalized the whole thing. But there was the commander that gave up the fort during the War of 1812. Porter Hanks was his name. He the whole legend was that he gave up the fort with only one shot, and and I always thought, like, what if that was your family legacy, and it wasn't true. What if you actually there was more to the story? So I made in the course of making, as we sort of made up our own version of that story, researching the real lieutenant, I think it was a lieutenant that surrendered the fort. I found out that he was taken prisoner by the British, taken down to Fort Detroit, put in, prisoner of war. And then the Americans attacked Fort Detroit, and he was,
Right.
they shelled the prison that he was in, and he got hit by a cannonball in the head and was like decapitated.
Oh,
Yes. So this guy had like bad luck, a run of bad luck that is just
Not good.
legendary. And
Not
I mean,
good.
it's bad enough, like you have to surrender. And it was probably, there was 300, it wasn't just like, 5 Brits at Fort Holmes. They had a huge force. He was definitely outnumbered. He did the right thing. But he was taken prisoner, and then he was
Wow.
killed by the Americans inadvertently, an attack on Fort Detroit. That one, I thought that was kind of interesting. So I
That is
played
great.
with that, but big time, because
They don't
Misguided
teach
is.
that.
Go ahead. Sorry.
They don't teach that in the tour of
I keep telling him. I said that has to be. That's like the most interesting thing
Pretty
like
extraordinary.
I ever heard.
Have you heard? I listened to some podcasts as I was researching this book that some of the docents at the fort said that if you go by the officers' quarters and the playroom, that when they leave it at night, it looks a certain way. When they come back the next day, the toys are moved and are different places, and the rooms been rearranged.
I have never heard that, but I will choose to believe it.
Okay, all right, I like that.
I believe. What about this story thing that we're talking about the fort? And this I know is total rumor, but I've heard that when the Americans took over from the British, and so the Americans were there with the fort, and there were some married men with their wives, and then the British got the fort again, and the American soldiers left, but some of the wives were left behind. And 2 years later, when the Americans came back, some of those wives weren't real happy that their husbands came back, because they'd been rather happy with the British men who were there. Have y'all heard that rumor?
No, I have
I
never
just
It
heard
was
that
a
one.
letter that a woman wrote. I
Why
don't
would
know.
they leave?
Could be a fiction.
Sorry.
Sounds like a book.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they
it
Sounds
sound
like a book.
They
Fiction
probably
book.
probably had better manners.
I'm thinking
Knowing
that's
what I know
true.
about British
Maybe.
people, they have
They
way
had
better
tea
manners.
at 3 p.m. for Pete's sake.
That's right. They had tea and scones.
And crumpets, yes.
Plus those cool
That's right.
red jackets. I mean,
I know. Right.
they
Right.
had a
Right.
good look. They had a good look going.
They
Plus
had
they
the
won.
bond, they had that bond sound, the 007.
And they won.
Yeah.
So they're probably like, you know what? Let's go with the
Right.
winners. I
Wow,
don't know.
that's
That's
amazing.
fantastic.
So what else have you incorporated into your stories? I know, again, when I was doing the research and I was looking into all the beautiful homes up on the bluffs, that they call them cottages, but I would call them mansions, wouldn't you? Wouldn't you call
Yeah.
them mansions?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
These beautiful homes, summer homes for wealthy people at the time, most of them built during the Gilded Age. And as I was doing the research, I did find some stories of people who really weren't that happily married, for example, or we look at those places, beautiful homes up on the bluff and think, oh, they had such a wonderful life and everything was so great. And there were some that really were not happily married. There were some that had been arranged marriages for the sake of the money, keeping the money all in the family.
I saw Titanic. I know how it works.
Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
and Downton Abbey and Gilded Age, if you watch
Right.
those, totally, it's
Yeah.
about prestige
Yeah.
and power, not love.
And
Yeah.
I learned that some of that played into some of the people on the island. So that was one of the things, the whole Titanic story was something that I incorporated into one of my Mackinac Island stories as well. So what's something else? I know we all conjure up these stories in so many different ways. What's something else that you've included in one of your books or all of your books about the island?
I have kind of it's totally fiction. Let me say that in the beginning, but I had an interesting conversation years ago with the guy at the butterfly house. And you go through this syndrome. Someone should write a book about the syndrome that you go through when you visit the island the first time. Then everybody wants to move there, right? Like if you just come as a tourist and you go on the Mackinac sites, they're all like, how can I live on Mackinac Island? How can they look at the prices? And of course, the average person cannot, whatever. So I had this interesting conversation with the guy at the butterfly house, and I was like, oh, love to live here, have a gift shop or whatever. This is years before I ever knew I would write a book or anything. And he said, well, it's not easy. It's not easy to get a shop here. Everything's owned by like one or two people that like run everything in the city council and the board. And so he had this very interesting story of someone coming from the outside trying to have something on the island. That just stuck with me. So my villain that carries through every one of my stories is the town chairwoman.
Oh, I want to lay her down.
Not
Catherine,
Margaret Down. So it's not
Catherine
Mayor
Sim
Down, right?
Dubois. She is just the villain that won't quit. So she carries through every single story, and she runs Mackinac Island, and you better be kowtowing to her, and you better be. And so my main character that also carries through has the one shop that she can't get and the property that she can't get. So
Yeah.
that's always just a subplot through everything and so that was
Fantastic.
based on that one comment from the guy at the butterfly house saying, oh, it's not easy to get something on this island. It's a lot of the, several families that run a lot of things. And that just,
These families are all good personal friends of mine. So I would never,
as I said, that's why I prefaced it by saying pure
no, I don't
fiction.
mean, but what I was going to say is it's definitely true. I mean, if you think about how small it is and these families, it's changing now, but the fact that they've held on and passed it on through generations to me is what makes the place so cool.
Right.
And it's changing now because the big corporations are now coming in.
Yeah, that's why everybody's freaking out,
They're
right?
all
'Cause
coming in.
they're
It's
so
like all these
afraid,
people.
yeah.
This is my devil's advocate moment, but I would say I think there's definitely truth to that. But I think that they've done an excellent job preserving the place and keeping it awesome. And the same people that are, anybody that's worried about that version of it might not love the version that's about to happen when they're no longer part of the place and it's just faceless corporations that own everything.
Right.
I think it's true in any town, any small town, really. I mean, there's always a smaller group of people that have held on and become successful and
I grew up in a small town, so I know that dynamic as well. Plus, my books are 1979, 1980, whatever. It's not now. So
yeah, well, it was the same way then too.
Yeah.
Trust me, because I was here then or there then.
That isn't it? It's Margaret Dowd who's the longest
mayor. Yeah.
Mayor. Yeah.
Yeah, she's my friend's cousin, excuse me. That's how I got involved with I was a psychologist. Like I said, got interested because my friend Rosemary, she took me to visit her aunt and uncle's hotel. And her cousin Margaret was there, and who's now been the longest mayor in the entire country. And so yeah, she's really got a I don't even know how anybody can replace her at this point.
Yeah.
But yeah, she's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
I think what's also magical about the island is the fact that it's a destination for people who are celebrating, commemorating, essentially escaping their everyday lives. And I think that's some of the fascination. I think it's also what the really a sacred purposes of so many of the restaurants and hotels is to provide hospitality in a way that's really a notch above. I mean, it's Disney-esque in its way. I think it's really more the tradition of the families who have been proud owners over many, many years, who established a standard for welcome and hospitality.
Well,
I think that's what some of the guests understand and want to capture, take home.
like the wedding that happened, like the wedding where there was the fire. Was it at
Yes,
Brigadoon?
right.
Yeah.
Yes, yes,
And
yes.
what and the fire, and then everybody chips
Right.
in and helps. I mean, where do you see that? It's
Right.
that it's like you're saying, that hospitality, that desire to make it something special. And I'm watching it on national news. That was pretty cool.
That was a
Yes,
weird moment
yes,
because that
exactly.
Brigadoon is a cottage that my family owned.
Right.
So,
Oh my
and we,
gosh.
Wow.
That
Yeah,
was the
so-
one they owned?
yeah. So we
Oh.
sold it a long time ago when everything got really expensive and it was kind of like time to get out. We were lucky enough to own that cottage for a
That's
while.
cool.
So that was where I kind of spent all my summers. So when that happened, all of a sudden I was getting all this, like people were saying like, oh, Brigadoon's
Yeah.
on fire. And I was like, whoa.
Wow, that's
You
amazing.
know, it was like a gut punch.
That iconic picture of the
Imagine.
bride and groom running down the
Yeah.
street with the North
Yes.
Fire behind them, and the entire party was taken in by Mission Point.
Yeah.
The wedding,
So great.
because the place.
Yeah,
had
that
burned
was
down.
cool.
I mean, it was
And
amazing.
Brigadoon, isn't that the perfect name for something that comes back to life every summer? And
That
the way
was
that
my, that was
Brigadoon came
named
to
by,
life.
that cottage was named by my mother and father.
That's so
fantastic
cool,
name.
Dave. Yeah,
Yeah.
that is
Yeah,
so
that's
And
cool.
that
cool.
the story of Brigadoon, as I understand it, was men coming back from World War II, disillusioned, right? I've got to find a place where all this stuff isn't happening, and they
Yeah.
happen upon Brigadoon.
Well, once
as a
every
cultural
100
moment.
years, it's supposed to come out of the
Yeah.
mist in Scotland. And my
Yeah.
dad was very Scottish. My mom was more on the Irish side, but they always said, because my dad was an automobile dealer in outside of Detroit, and we rented the place for years and years and years from the woman that owned it before us. Angeline was her name. She's a total character, but they had always had this dream that someday they were going to be able to afford to buy it in places. I know it seems insane to say this, but they were actually somewhat affordable back then. You know, they were all falling apart. I mean, this is before everything got the major upgrade. Anyway, for my mom's, I think it was her, I don't remember which birthday it was, but he presented her a long flat gift and she opened it up. And they always said their dream was, because it was called Maison d'Angelique. And they said, if we ever are able to purchase this place, we're going to rename it Brigadoon. So anyway,
Love
my
it.
mom opens up this gift and it was the sign.
The sign.
that
Oh, that's
Brigadoon.
fantastic.
Just
Oh.
like,
Oh, that's so cool.
Lovely.
yeah.
Love
So that's
that.
still, I mean, thankfully that's still the name. So that legacy remains, which makes
That's
all the
fantastic.
McVeigh
Oh, I
family
love
happy.
that. And Stacy, I think you said it so beautifully when you said that people want an escape when they come to the island, and they certainly do get that. And we've mentioned the Grand Hotel, and I know some of us have incorporated the Grand Hotel into our stories, and it is such an iconic place, and the history of the hotel is really quite amazing. And so and what are your experiences at the hotel, if at all? I mean, is it someplace where you go, you don't go? Do you put it in your stories? It supposedly has the longest porch of any hotel in the country. What?
It's in every one of my stories. That's where the people end up staying. Not because they're rich, because there's always something that allows them to stay there. And I know in the real world, you don't get to go stay at the Grand Hotel for months at a time.
Right.
But in
It's
my
called
stories,
fiction.
it's something that it's fiction. So something happens, and even though they don't have money, they end up there. And something else that I incorporated is there was a labyrinth below the Grand,
Mm,
and it's no longer there when they
Wow.
redid the pool. And so the labyrinth is a big part of every single one of my stories. And I'm so happy that it is, because it's preserved and it's no longer there.
wow.
I'm so
That's
happy
cool.
that it lives on in my stories, because I loved that labyrinth below it. And I'm so sad that it's gone.
What is that?
Yeah.
The labyrinth is like a sacred walking path.
Oh,
And there was one, and it was on the other side of the pool. There was a little woods, and they had a sign that talked about labyrinths, and it's based on this one in the 1500s, this famous one in Paris, France. It's based on that one. So I talk about that a lot in my first story. And they in every one of my stories, they end up in the labyrinth that has a lot to do with every story. And now it's gone. And I'm like, I'm so happy that it's preserved in my books anyway.
Nice.
That's
But
really
yeah,
Yeah, it's
love
like a
the
little bit of
Grand.
a
Stayed there many, many
shining,
times. Love it.
shining vibe. My main character, the love interest for Jack in the Dock Porter is the cello player at the Grand Hotel. But our experience was it was always kind of like, at least from the Dock Porter world, because the Grand Hotel never had dock porters. They always had their own carriage and their own
carriage.
system, and we're like,
Their own
and
drink.
they also had a no tipping policy, which for any true dock porter is just like, unheard of. And so we had an attitude towards, this is the truth. We had a little bit of an attitude towards the Grand Hotel because it wasn't it wasn't on our route, and anything that we couldn't control, we had to like make fun of. But
Yeah.
but that was
We
one
kind of did too at the Iroquois. I describe it in my book as the Iroquois being the less pretentious cousin of the Grand. What's funny though is the Macs were friends with the Musters, and I got
they're all
their
friends.
table, the four of them. They were pals. And
Yeah,
in
of
my
course.
book, I mentioned a waitress, a young waitress, popping champagne and the cork getting out of control and bouncing off the brick wall, which in fact did happen to me. And while Mrs. Mack, I thought I might lose my job, Mr. Mack was completely entertained by it. Like he just had such a wry smile all the time and a sense of humor.
He was cool.
That he was great. He took us out of his boat at the end of the year. Like he was they were a great partnership. He was like the good easy cop, even though he actually was a state patrolman, right?
Yeah.
And Mrs. Mack was the firm hand and didn't crack a smile too often, except you knew she loved you, but she was never playful. She was never playful, although I'm sure she was with a lot of people, just not with the
I think
wait
she was
staff.
off hours. She just had that
Off
kind
hours.
of vibe. Yeah.
I never hung out with her off hours.
Yeah.
Dave, I do have a question for you regarding the
Yeah.
grant. I have this recollection of going down to the water around the Grand and celebrating Jamaican Independence Day, and there being a steel drum band and a lot of tomfoolery. I remember that being really fun. Am I right? Did I make that up?
Yeah. That was a huge deal. Every year they had the Jamaican part. I didn't know it was. I guess it was Independence Day. I never really knew why.
I think it was, unless
all
I
I
made
knew
that up,
is that all of a sudden there was a Jamaican party. I'd never heard reggae music in my life, and all of a sudden we would sneak over there. And I was pretty little at that time, but we used to sneak on and just watch because it was like, it was a whole scene and it was cool and the music
didn't
was
you
different.
go as a dock porter? I think I
It was
went
at
as a
that time
waitress.
but the time I started, being old enough to go to things like the Jamaican parties, I think they had moved it, like they made it, the Grand Hotel kind of like organized it and made it a official, they made it boring basically.
Well,
but
the
This seems
newspaper
very-
showed that they recently had something for a Jamaican celebration. So that
they
was
still do it every
Okay.
year, but I just mean for a while it was just on the beach at the end of the boardwalk.
That's what I'm remembering. It was kind of spontaneous. It sort of
it
was
was
like
not organized. And that was when
did
it was really cool back in the day, because it was just, it was just different and the music was cool and they had bonfires going and everybody was having a great time. But I was a little young for that. And then by the time I
was
became
enough
a
older.
porter, sorry, I just, but pretty sure by the time I started dock portering, they had moved, the Grand kind of organized, and I'm sure they did a beautiful job with it and everything else, but it didn't have the same sort of like beach.
Well, they probably put guardrails around it, right? So that
I don't think it was on
nobody
and I don't think it was on the beach anymore. I think they actually gave them like a venue and all that stuff. And
Well,
I was
that's what I meant, like guardrails, like legal guardrails. I thought it was a spontaneous celebration
I
with
think
a
it
lot
was.
of Jamaicans
It
and
was the
a
coolest
lot
thing
of
in the
steel.
world.
No,
Yeah,
It was kind of, and it felt
a lot of
a
people
little illicit.
A lot of people may not know that there are many islanders, Jamaican and other islanders from the Caribbean who in the summertime during season, like from April to October, who work there. That's where the seasonal workers come from. So it's such an amazing, eclectic group of people.
Totally.
Because you have
insane. It was
all
awesome.
Americans,
That's exactly right. There was people coming. It was just, you couldn't, I would try to describe it, even just going back to Milford after my summers. on the island, I'd be like, I can't even explain to you what I just came from, but it was the coolest thing ever. And it was like, I was doing that every single summer, which is
Well-
part of the reason I'm insane now, I think.
Insane, but you're insane in a very good way.
I would like to think so.
But I always think of the original natives had the very same thing going. I mean, here were these people that were totally alien to them who showed up out of nowhere, and some spoke this language and some spoke another language.
Yeah.
They had to do different things, and so it's been that way for a very long time.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
really wonderful, just so rich.
Yes.
in-
Linda, back
Mhm.
to Grand Hotel. I also have a number of books set at the Grand Hotel. And one of my contracts I got because I wanted to set this thing at the Grand Hotel, because I could only get a contract possibly if there was a controversy, which at the time there was a controversy over the redecoration at the Grand when it was taken over. And so a friend of mine I would just come into town to go to the island, and a friend of mine told me, hey, did you hear, that they're being sued? And she told me about it. And so
Was this a Carlton Varney story?
Yes,
Okay.
the Carlton Varney.
Yeah.
And I could use it because it was factual, it was documented. I researched all that major, and it was a dual timeline. I swear, I will never do another dual timeline.
Why? Oh, I want to hear why.
No,
Maybe tell me later.
it's so hard. It's just way too hard. But yeah, I had a number of stories set at the Grand Hotel, and we've stayed at there a number of times. We love that place. When I was a young teenager, I'd be like, oh, one day I'll stay at the Grand Hotel. And
Exactly.
yeah. So we finally did. We like to stay there when we can. But if it hadn't been for their controversy with Carlton Varney, I couldn't even have submitted, for that book contract. So thank you, Grand Hotel, and your controversy.
Wow.
I just set my stuff there and didn't ask for any permission, but it wasn't really set there. It was just it's minor. I've always been afraid. You grow up slightly afraid of the Grand Hotel because they definitely had like the big power on the island, at least back then.
Yes, they do.
So you always want to be a little bit sort of.
Yeah, it
Then I
took
just
me
decided, what are you gonna do?
2.5, 3 years to get them to agree to let me use an image, like a Grand Hotel image on a cover.
Yeah.
So all I wanted to do is want to use one of mine, but I mean, that's their prerogative. That's their right to.
Yeah.
But because it was documented that the contemporary issue, I didn't have to get permission, the legal permissions. I just included what was published in the papers.
Well,
Smart.
I have to tell you all, I have loved this conversation so much. And I wish we were sitting on the Grand Hotel porch,
Yes.
drinking tea or maybe something a little stronger, and could just have this conversation forever and a day. But our time is starting to wind up. And so what I would like to do to finish up here is have each of you again show your books or one of your books, and just tell folks again the name of the book, a little bit about the book, and I'm going to include in the description for this podcast where each of you can be reached and where they can find your book. So there'll be links in the description so everybody can get to what you've written, all this great stuff. And so Carrie, if you would, we'll start with you, and we'll just tell us a little bit again about your book, your books, and kind of let us know as we wrap up how we can find all of that.
So many books. I do, like I said, there's over a dozen Christian fiction. And I did start out with historical. That one came out again last year. Was a fun one.
What was the name of that one again?
This one is In Desperate Straits. You're talking about like the people that lived on the cliffs. I won't say the families' names. West Bluff. I was inspired by a story of someone that had been a historical figure, and things just went so bad for them. And so in that story, I had been writing, this kind of tangential, but I was there riding on the back of a dray, like this barbecue ride thing, taking us on a hay ride. And it was just so fun. I thought, well, what if that was a girl, 100 years ago? And so that's what I had, but I had her meeting up with the guy who had been, they were totally down on their luck. So that was that one. And then this is just another series I have. This guy, Garrett, he's a lumberjack, but he wants to be a craftsman. And he ends up at the Grand Hotel, and he's in a ton of my books. I love Garrett. He's probably my most Christ-like character, even though in the first book, the Fruitcake Challenge, we have him punching somebody out. So he knows when to get mad, and he saves
He's a
people in the
lumberjack.
stories.
What do you expect?
He was a lumberjack. My family had a lot
There
of
were
lumberjacks.
lumberjacks on the island. I was surprised to learn historically correctly. There were lumberjacks who lived on the island.
Sure. Yeah, my great grandfather worked, and my grandfather, they were lumberjacks down in Traverse City, northern Michigan, Upper Peninsula, and that's what got me interested in lumberjack stories. This is like a fall setting one, Mackinac Island Beacon. I loved Round Island Lighthouse. I still love it because, and I was taking a million pictures of it when I was on the island working so many decades ago. Anyway, I paid $1 for one little pin put on to say I supported the Round Island, saving Round Island.
You were
Lighthouse.
official Round Island lighthouse keeper. That's what it said.
Well, I wasn't that, but
No, that's what they said.
Did they really?
Oh yeah, official Round Island lighthouse keeper. That was. I had them too. I had a couple. My family bought them everywhere, because we had guests up the house all the time. So we're always like, you gotta buy one of those pens.
This is like in 1970 something. They were trying to save the lighthouse. Yeah,
it was crumbling.
That's neat to know, and they're still doing this, still saving everything there. And the pins are so popular. Michele, tell us a little bit about your books, a little bit more.
Well, there is the 6. They start in 1979 and they go up a year. My main character is in Being Ethel in the World That Loves Lucy, and then she becomes a Lester character as she keeps meeting people on the porch of the Grand Hotel, and then they carry through. This is my first one, my latest one that is set in the fall. All the others are mostly spring and summer. And this is about Goldie and Gilda Locks, twin sisters. You probably didn't know Goldilocks had a sister. Goldie is perfect, dimples, curly blonde hair. Gilda has a big nose. Straight hair.
I love all these stories.
And they end up at the Grand Hotel because they do anything their granny tells them, because their granny runs their purse strings and she may or may not be in the mafia.
Oh.
So the story ensues. So it's very fast paced and a very, the one thing I'm happy about is, because I put a mystery in everyone, is it's not easy to solve. That's my hardest writing thing as a writer, is they're not easy to solve, which is really my greatest, torture. But anyway, you can read them in order or you can read them one at a time. But I think it's richer if you read them in order, but you can definitely, I have people that have the certain name, like I had a Wendy by Being Wendy, of course. That's the thing. But anyway, yeah. Thank you so much for this, Linda, too. It's been just fantastic to get to talk to all you guys and learn your background.
So glad we could get together. Dave.
Oh, yes, Dave. So myself and my buddy Jim, who is also a dock porter, who is in a picture right here. So he couldn't be here, but that's the guy. He's the less good looking one. Wrote 3 books called the series is Mackinac Island novels, which is The Dock Porter, Somewhere in Crime, and Misguided, which came out last summer. And they're all basically one character, Jack McGuinn's adventures on the island, loosely based on my own timeline as far as when I was there. You meet him at 21, you meet him at 11, you meet him at 16. Each summer he has a different job, and each summer it's just complete chaos. Sorry, some folks are walking in. But they're available. I mean, the best place to buy them is on the Mackinac Island at the Mackinac Island bookstore, which we all love. But they're also available. You can request them at any bookstore, and they're also available on Amazon, obviously. And we have a website called thedockporter.com that has more information on everything. But they're fun books. They're probably PG-13. They're not like super clean, but they're definitely not like racy or anything. They're just somewhere right in the middle, kind of coming of age stories. I like to think that they're hilarious.
I think they are.
They are.
That's just my
There.
See what I did right there? I just like let you guys validate me.
I like
We
it.
see
I
what you
like
did
it.
there.
See what I did there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
You're good.
So that's,
You're good.
thank you.
Stacy,
Mhm.
tell us a little bit more about yours.
Sure. Let's see if I can do the picture the correct way. My novel's called When the Season Ends. Can you see
Oh, that's
Oh,
cool.
the
it looks
panorama?
great with your
Well
blouse.
done. Well
too.
done.
Yeah.
It's the Iroquois.
Qua.
So
The
the cover
qua.
denotes what happens to the main character, Olivia Nash, who is somewhere mid-40s, finds herself alone for the summer when her husband's on a mission assignment. I'm sorry, a merger assignment in Montreal. Her son's interning at a summer camp. They think she'll stay home in Chicago and do whatever it is she does because no one really knows what she does. And she decides that she could have an adventure of her own. Not really thinking that way, but ends up on the island, ends up waiting tables as an adult at the Iroquois, and discovers there sort of a new purpose, a new adventure, and more or less adopts a young woman in a crisis pregnancy, the bookstore owner named Cliff, who actually was a friend of mine who owned the Island bookstore before it was sold. We would meet him at the jockey club for drinks after shifts. I don't know why he befriended 3 waitresses. Anyway, he was delightful. And then the chef. And the question that the book raises is whether or not this character can return to the life that she had when the season ends. And so
Oh,
the cover begins with lilacs on the back cover into summer, and then on the front it wraps to fall on the Iroquois to cover sort of this theme of lilac season through to the end of the season.
oh, I
Very
love
cool.
that. That's very clever.
Yeah,
That's
and shout
really
out to Noelle Skiba. I mean, we were in her gallery looking for art that depicted the Iroquois, and she just looked at my husband and me and said, "Well, I should do the cover art," as though that were a done like obviously. And I was like, "Oh boy, I don't know." But my husband's in the agency business, like some of you, and he was like, "Hey, I know how this goes. It's fine. I work with artists a lot. Like this is cool." I was like,
Yeah.
"Okay, I do words. I don't do that." So I'm grateful to her. She's just been a fun person to partner with. It's been great.
It's
Nice.
perfect. It's just so beautiful. Well, the one
Yeah, she did a beautiful job.
about is Secrets of the Island. Again, I mentioned it earlier. I have written 8 books set on the island. I've been visiting the island since I was 9, and I'll never forget that very first visit. We got bicycles and we rode around and we saw the big arch rock and the big hotel, and it was so exciting. It was like nirvana. It was better than anything Disney World ever could have done.
Yeah,
So-
definitely. You know, what's crazy, not to interject, but it's just sort of appropriate. I just was back in Michigan 4 days ago. My daughter just started college, her freshman year at Hope College, and they're doing, she's an international, we live in the Philippines. So she was basically raised in the
Oh.
Philippines, but so they're doing their international, or all the international students come early and then they take them on a tour of Michigan, which is really cool. And she just called me like right before this thing started and said, "I'm on Mackinac right now. What kind of fudge should I buy?"
All
She's
of
been
it.
there before with me because she's come to a couple different book signings, but it's pretty cool. She's there with all of her like college crew right now and literally on the island as we speak. So I thought that was
I've got lots of friends whose kids either are at Hope or have been our Hope graduates. That's awesome. Happy for
yeah,
her. That's
Yeah.
great.
excited. We're excited.
Well, I'll never forget that first trip, and I've loved it ever since. I've been back like most of you. I've been back so many times I couldn't even tell you how many times. But this first book that I wrote that's set on the island is part of a trilogy, but actually each book stands alone, like some of yours. They're part of a series or a trilogy, but you can read each story by itself. And it starts out with this family in the 1920s with a book called Secrets of the Asylum in Traverse City. And so if you know Traverse City, you know the big old
Yeah,
asylum.
yeah.
And so the story of the asylum is amazing. So I write this story about the 1920s, but I find out that there truly was a family that had a connection to Mackinac Island with a family member in the asylum. So that's
Mm.
and then the next one, Secrets of the Island. And that's what I mentioned already, the Red Cross nurse in World War II. And she was traumatized and she goes to her grandfather's cottage on the island and starts finding out family history, including about the asylum. And what she finds out and what other women in the family went through really helps her understand the strength that she's inherited, that she can handle whatever it was that she went through. And I always say that I write with grit, sizzle, and soul. So my books are real world women's fiction. And so I did that. And then the last one in the trilogy is still connected to the island. And everybody who reads it, readers always tell me they fall in love with the grandfather. They like the characters, all the characters, but there's this grandfather that's in each story throughout the family. And they always like the grandfather. So that makes my heart.
That's cool.
The last in the trilogy, I said in my hometown, which is West Branch. And I don't know if you've ever heard of West Branch, tiny little.
course.
Yeah,
Drive through West Branch on the way to Mackinac.
I know. You have to-
I-75.
They drive
I'm like,
by it. They didn't
I've
drive
stopped.
through it.
I've never actually gotten off the exit there, but
I
I
know, nobody does.
consider it like a halfway mark between like Milford and Mackinac. I'm like, oh, West Branch, good, we're getting there.
I know, just lovely little town Victorian atmosphere. It's really great. So anyway, my books also, I have a Christmas trilogy set on the island. I have some other books set on the island. So I'm just so happy to finally, after being fans of all of you for so long, I'm so happy to finally have met you, at least this way. Next time, I hope it's on the island. Let's do that. What do you say?
That'd be
Totally down with that.
awesome.
Come in.
Wouldn't
Come
it
in.
be fantastic? And so we'll do it there
Okay.
next time. And thank you so
Okay.
much.
Thank
for
you.
being here.
Thanks for
Thank you, Linda,
organizing
for
this.
setting
Very
this up.
cool. Yeah,
Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
Linda. Thank you,
so
everyone.
much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.